Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Scorpio and Gemini rising. And this is one of those examples of what I call false advertising. Because Scorpio, known for its intensity, is such a stark contrast to your what we would call facade or the ascendant, which in Gemini is very light, very airy, very, sometimes you could say very superficial, even, very glib, meaning that the person is very articulate, but there's kind of like a slick quality to it that can almost be like a flim flam man. Now, this isn't, I hope that I'm not coming across as prejudiced towards Gemini. I'm not. But sometimes when you do have this radical difference between the sun and the rising sign, I feel like it can really show that the person is employing this ascendant as kind of a, uh, gosh, there was a word I was going to use because I was going to say defense mechanism. I always feel that the rising sign can be a defense mechanism or a coping strategy when the person was young, dealing with their family of origin, and especially with these two totally different types of signs. You may have felt like the black sheep in the family, and you didn't quite know how to, put yourself out there. Maybe you had a family that was very in the mind, like the Gemini, and you were just the emo person, like, oh, why is he or she so, takes everything so to heart. And so you try to be more like them, joke around all the time, when really you are feeling these very maybe uncomfortable emotions sometimes. And they just didn't understand why you were so sensitive or so serious. I mean, when I say serious, I don't think of Scorpio like Capricorn, which I do think tends to be very dour and overly serious. Scorpio, I just fall back on the word intense, not being able to think of a synonym for that, and, kicking myself that I keep repeating myself. But I can't think of a better word. And um, you may value intensity in other people, which can sometimes be to your detriment that you do. But by the same token, you personally are, tend to be repelled by superficiality and, just people that you sense as insincere, um, lightweights, you know what I mean? But also, you may have that side to yourself, ironically. And what I was trying to say is that I can't remember what exactly I would call it, like a smoke screen, maybe that's what it is, where you're using it as a way to keep people at bay, because Scorpio is one of those signs that wants desperately to form a deep connection with somebody, and not just, on a romantic level. If you have a friend, you want very, like, the confidants, people who are, what do they say? I wanted to say ride or die chick, And I actually looked it up because I wasn't quite sure if I was going to use it correctly. And I thought it meant loyalty, but it kind of means risky, engaging in risky behavior with your partner, to show, maybe to show that maybe it is because of loyalty, I guess. But anyway, this whole idea is that you are like that, but at the same time, um, because of your sensitivity and what you may have gone through earlier in life, you may have trust issues that another person will betray you, or even the possibility that they could betray you is just too much to bear. So you kind of keep people at arm's length, and you could do so with that Gemini persona. So that can mean somebody who is very witty, who is very, like I said, glib, where they're very amusing in their speech and they're very intelligent. Um, and they give off this vibe of this accessibility, like they're, kind of like the opposite sign of Sag, that they're an open book, but there's always this part of themselves that is kind of closed off. And so this is not an easy combination, therefore, because um, you're kind of diametrically opposed. Your true self is diametrically opposed to this outer facade that you're kind of putting out there as kind of a maybe like a decoy, to keep people distracted so that they won't really see who you are, so that you can keep yourself safe. So, very interesting. And people, the bottom line is that people may not realize just how intense you are emotionally. The moon sign is important in this regard, so you would have to see what that is, because if it's in water as well, then this is going to really enhance that intensity. But if it's in, let's say, air, so Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, you may really have more of the detachment, and you almost think like what we would call your core personality traits. You might be exasperated with them, thinking, gosh, why do I have to be so emotional? And almost like kind of disowning it. And that's a mistake, because your sun is your central influence. So in relationships, you might blow hot and cold. You might have times when you're very almost obsessive about someone, and then you kind of drop them like a hot potato. This I did a video of like the sun in Scorpio and the moon in Aquarius, and a lot of people, I guess, have that combination, or also the opposite version of that. People are fascinated when they have the Scorpio and then they have the air sign energy. And I think it is because it's crazy making for the very person who has it. So I just want to say that I feel that the way that we honor this combination is that we understand that maybe when we were children, we had to put on a mask. The more disparate or incongruous, however you say it, the sun and the rising sign, I feel, is the more that the person had to adapt to their own detriment to a situation in their family of origin. And you may have spent your 20s more like a Gemini. Maybe you were denying your feelings. Maybe you were. Usually, I will say that Scorpio people do not, take sex lightly, and they're not prone to affairs. But when you have something like Gemini rising, you may have a lot of commitment issues yourself, especially when you're younger, and that might lead you to be more promiscuous, or at least refusing to get involved in a relationship. So if that has been the case, and now you're kind of playing catch up and you feel like you put yourself in a difficult situation because you kind of conditioned yourself out of believing that you could ever have a relationship, you're going to have to be able to make yourself less rigid, because you're a fixed sign and you might have Mercury in Scorpio as well. And so your mentality may be very rigid. And when you think a thought, it's like this ironclad thing. No, it's not, you know. You have the ability to change if you want to. But you have to entertain the possibility that you can do that. And that's where that rigidity can sometimes work against you. So, and another thing too is that if you are presenting as a Gemini, you may attract air signs, fire signs, and it might not be the best for you overall. So, keep all of those things in mind in terms of your ability to commit to someone. This is not enough information to go on in terms of like how your relationships are going to go. But suffice it to say, you might be one of those people that doesn't decide to settle down until you're in your 30s. And when you do, it could be a time for you that is very peaceful if you have chosen wisely. And what else can I say? Actually, what I was going to say is that um, I do compatibility readings, which I label as relationship readings, for people sometimes when they are new in a relationship and they're just trying to see if that person has what they're looking for. And of course, this is, nobody can do that 100% and really like know for sure if that person is right for them or not. But it's just one of those things where sometimes people don't realize what is really important to them. And you do have this side to yourself that is very glib and intellectual. And so you should definitely value this. And you might have inner planets in Sagittarius and or Libra. And these two signs are intellectual as well. So as a Scorpio, your emotions are the first thing that you are dealing with, coping with, and that may make you think that you have to have this drama filled relationship. You may kind of get it twisted a little bit. And really, that doesn't have to be that way. And that's another reason why it's very important to understand the different parts of you, because there's a part of you that does kind of shy away from that. And it might be like one of two extremes. Either if somebody doesn't act totally intense in a relationship, you might think that they don't really love you, or you might feel like um, you might be cynical about love and you may feel like it's a trap. I don't want to, get hurt, or I don't want to lose my freedom with the Gemini part. And if you have like Venus in Sagittarius, then you could also be thinking of it in that sense. So there's a lot that could be happening that contradicts your desires. And so you have to get that straight. And, actually, Gemini is definitely a sign of contradictions. But if you value a person's intellect, if you value their um, the person's ability to change, because that might be annoying to you, being a fixed sign, that you have a side to yourself that is very changeable. But the Gemini is a mutable sign, so it's flexible. Flexibility isn't bad. It's just when people are twisting in the wind and they don't have a core self. But I have a feeling you do have a core self, being a Scorpio. Scorpio people tend to be very extreme. They tend to either really believe in something or like something, or be completely indifferent or absolutely hate it. There's not usually a middle ground of neutrality or ambivalence, you know? And so that can be problematic when you're trying to look at somebody and characterize them, because you may just have these very rigid pronouncements. This person's good, this person's bad. And not see that it's not that simple. Sometimes people are a mixture of things. So, this has been the one combination that I haven't just been like totally um, talking about in terms of relationships in a very straightforward way, because I do feel that some of you may run away from relationships. And even, I don't know, this might be a little bit risky to say. I was going to say, even gravitate towards getting involved with people who are already in a relationship. But I know a lot of you guys would protest and say, I don't do stuff like that. I don't cheat on people. But with Gemini rising, you might have more of a possibility of doing so, because you are so in love with novelty, in love with changing yourself. Is that variety is the spice of life, so to speak. And then it justifies not really getting close to someone. So it's kind of like this way to kind of do that. I don't know how else to articulate. Just having that kind of an excuse, built-in excuse. I feel if you can find the person that is right for you, who gives you freedom, and yet somebody you can trust, then you'll give body, mind, and soul to that person. When it comes to professions, I don't feel that the rising sign is really influential this way, but just in terms of part of your personality, I would say being a therapist, anything where you are analyzing people, is a given, because you do have the analytical skills from Gemini coupled with the psychological insight from Scorpio. Because you're ruled by Mercury, since Gemini is at the ascendant, you might favor education. And if so, this can indicate someone who is really concerned with transformation, because that's one of the themes of Scorpio, is about transformation. So, what came into my mind is reform school. So maybe you would gravitate towards teaching at a school, for kids who have gotten into trouble. I don't know if they have reform schools. They did. I used to be a teacher's assistant. And they would and it was at the junior high level, and they would send these kids, when they got into trouble, to juvie, so juvenile hall. And so maybe like a teacher there or something like that. But I think they had specific schools for kids who were troubled too. And you want to help them to reform, to do better. Um, Spiritual, metaphysical types of pursuits, maybe even at the teaching level, because you have those skills. You can present things in a way that is very informative. The rising sign isn't necessarily just directly impacting that. I'm talking more about having that Gemini, having that Mercury as your ruler, that can just favor communication of all forms. Okay, that's what I have for you, Scorpio. I hope that this resonated. If you'd like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.